I've actually been reporting on this event since the 1980s, and I actually never expected to be sat up here rather than in there reporting on it. So it's a nice change, and thanks for the invitation to do this. I actually remember very well when this last slot of the day was given over to a sort of humorous or a wacky presentation, and I don't think I'm going to be delivering on any of those scores, but maybe the panel might do better. But it is the last part of the day, and it is incredibly important as well. I've been to so many events this week, and I don't think there's been one where somebody hasn't mentioned how important seafarers are and how important the human element is. So with more than 30 years reporting on seafarers and shipping, it's really interesting to see how the same old subjects keep appearing. The old perennials of piracy, fatigue, supply and demand for maritime skills. Those are all the things that have hogged their headlines over the last 30 years. But depressingly, throughout all of that, there's always been this sort of constant stream of seafarer welfare stories. Now, I don't know whether it's social media, improved incident reporting, or increased awareness, and I think some of you may have your own ideas on that. But I have to say, from where I sit and from what I'm reporting on, I see more maritime welfare stories, seafarer welfare stories than ever before. Only yesterday, I got the ISWAN annual report, the Seafarer Helpline, a 37% increase in seafarers asking for help during 2016, 15% increase in the number of seafarers assisted. Welfare and emergency cases, which usually involve abandonment, were up from 44 in 2015 to 85 last year. So, you know, are things getting better? Are things getting worse? I think that's the purpose of this discussion today, and actually how can we improve the mechanisms for making seafarers' lives better. And I think particularly looking at the mechanisms of enforcement, and how can we improve life at sea? How can we get the well-trained, motivated seafarers that we need for the future? ICS has assembled a great panel here, so I'm keen to get things moving. I think the best thing to do is, if you all want to sort of just rattle off a very quick statement, in your thoughts about, you know, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? What's your position? And then we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for being here to the audience. Is life at sea getting better or worse? Well, it's easy to answer sitting here dry and shore-based. I think a couple of numbers and a couple of facts show that life at sea is probably getting better. It's safer. We have less accidents, certainly. It's probably things like better food on board. We have almost continuous communication on board with the shore, which can be a great advantage. We have vastly increased contractual safety for seafarers. And I think also an important point is for seafarers, it has become a lot easier, a lot better to move from a ship-based job to a shore-based job. If you remember the image, and we talk a lot about the image of the industry, we need to improve that. I think Seafarer have done that very successfully over the last 40 years. Trying to think back a couple of decades, the image of seafarers was not the best. And as a seafarer, if you said, I want to move ashore, it was like, can't you stay on the ship? I think now the image of a seafarer with experience managing people, living together with people, being on the ship for quite some time, is extremely positive, and for some ship owners even too positive, because too many seafarers find very easily jobs which are land-based. So I think that is also career-wise very, very helpful. At the same time, I think one of the big issues that need to be talked about, which may not actually an improvement, I don't have a clear answer on that, coming back to the communication. The communication, constant communication, can be a great advantage, certainly benefits, something we all want, we all at least do, but it can also be a curse, and that's what we see on the ships today. And not to put the fingers at the seafarers, an observation actually the class teacher of our daughter did when the class did an outing 2 years ago. The whole class was sitting around for lunch, and nobody was talking. Everybody was looking at the screen. And we have a similar phenomenon on the ships today. People actually, constant communication with the shore leads to solitude on the ship. And that creates problems, and that relates to something Andrew just said. I think the answer is certainly not, let's cut the communication. The seafarers shouldn't communicate with shore, but it is a question we are not able to answer yet. So, and the second thing that has not gotten better is the vast increase in administration that has to be done on the ship. And I think the officers in particular are suffering from that severely, and that needs to be solved and can be solved, I think.
Thanks very much. Richard, I wondered from your point of view, I mean, the last annual Paris MOU statistics I saw, again, seem to be suggesting an increase in MLC cases. But again, is that just a byproduct of more inspection, better inspection, or do you think it does hold up a mirror to, particularly in the last few years, the impact of recession, the impact of downturn, and perhaps some owners cutting back on seafarer welfare?
Okay, Andrew. Well, let's say first of all, the seafarers working in living conditions are very dear, not only to myself personally, but also to the Paris MOU. And we've been involved since the beginning in 1982. Actually, the Paris MOU was a follow-up of what was called the Hague Memorandum, which was only focusing on seafarers working in living conditions. But we've been involved since the beginning. First, of course, we only had the ILO Convention 147, and when the MLC entered into force, we started enforcing that convention, and I must really say it's a major improvement. We're very happy. Of course, we had to, let's say, also adapt to the new situation. There are areas now that we would not inspect in the past. Seafarers employment agreements, for one, and let's say more the softer side of the seafarers working in living conditions. So we spend a lot of resources into training our port state control officers and getting all of them online. We waited a couple of years after the entry into force, and then last year we had a concentrated inspection campaign on MLC. And overall, I think the outcome was quite positive. As you said, you do see, of course, if you're focusing on MLC, you do see also an increase in the deficiencies that go with that. Also detentions. Our port state control officers are not reluctant anymore to also detain now on the softer side. If there's a breach in hours of work and rest, seafarers, employment agreements, a ship may get detained. So I think overall the MLC has improved the situation very much, although sometimes I'm surprised with, I could call it incidents. And I'd like to mention one. It's a ship called the Maria Laura, and the ISM company is located in the EU. The flag is on our whitelist. The two ROs which were involved, both for ISM and the other certificates, were IAC societies. The ship had 40 deficiencies. 30 deficiencies were detainable, and 35 deficiencies were ISM related. And I've seen the pictures, and I looked at them last week again. And also with respect not only to safety and marine environment, but also the working and living conditions. The ship, it was a container ship. It was a total mess. And then I asked myself, what went wrong there? I mean, what went wrong with the company? What went wrong with the flag state, the people on board? Everything went wrong there. And but you can all see it because it's posted on our website. There's a caught in the net case. It was detained in Germany by our German colleagues, and it's an example of how things can go wrong sometimes. It is not, let's say, the standard, because I feel that the standard overall with most flag states is very good. But there are these cases, and we see still cases also, let's say, with less reputable flags. which are, let's say, figuring on our blacklist. And also there, the working and living conditions for the seafarers are still way behind of what they should be now that we have the MLC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jackie, I wondered, taking what Richard said sort of one step further, you know, how can these things go so wrong? You know, how can a ship be like that? And in terms, I know from the ITF inspectorate, you know, some of the cases that the inspectors come across, again, plenty of horror stories. You know, why is it happening? And is your perception that it is getting worse or getting better? Would you agree with the sort of general impression that things might be improving, or do you think it is on a downturn at the moment?
Well, first I want to thank the ICS for inviting me back. It's always a pleasure for me to represent the ITF and their affiliates and their members, which are the Seafarers. If I had the answer to that question, I'd be able to put a stop to it in some way or the other, because we do have quite an amount of resources, and we have a large network around the world. As you said, we have around 140 inspectors in 59 countries. So I don't know how it goes wrong. Somewhere it's people not taking responsibility. That's what it is. It's wanting to make financial gain and not take the cost. So we do see, of course, because the market has been challenging with the market in various sectors, and that, of course, can cause people to take shortcuts because they want to stay in the market. I think that some companies and some ships should be out of the market. That's just how it is. If you cannot abide by the playing field that's set with the same conditions and make sure that your seafarers are treated properly, then you should be out. That's what I think. I think we do have cases where we hear of cases where ships are detained and then they're not allowed in that country for 12 months. I think they shouldn't be allowed back at all. And if that was that strict, then I think that very many would probably shape up or ship out. So if life at sea is getting any better or worse, it's been several years since I sailed myself. I left in 1998, and when I was at sea, I was on a Norwegian passenger ferry between Norway and the continent. So it was a lot different situation for me then and now for those who are in international trade. When I do talk to more mature seafarers who have been in the industry for a while, what they do miss is actually shore leave. They miss having that time ashore. I mean, everyone here knows that time is money. It has to be a quick turnaround, and they do miss that. Now, some say that, does that mean that much? Well, I think people who say that have not necessarily been confined in a limited space for X amount of months without being able to change sceneries. I know I'd go a little bit stir-crazy if I was stuck in an apartment and a building and just limited to that area for 9 months, which is what a lot of the ratings especially have contracts for 9 months. So on a positive side in the industry, I do see that companies and managers and operators and governments are much more focusing on the health and well-being, not just the physical health, but also the well-being and the mental health of the seafarers. And that's a very positive trend that I see coming in. Challenges for the future, I think that there's two things that are going to be challenging, and that's stability and security. If you have financial instability, then that is going to cause issues with security. We see political instability, which is a huge challenge. We have a lot of cases with abandonment of vessels in ports where, as the ITF, we have very limited resources. Middle East, for one. We had a case where we had to get the Yemeni Union to assist us to repatriate some seafarers that were abandoned there. There's around, I've been told there's 37 cases of abandonment the last year so far. Oh no, this year. So 36 cases this year, 10 in progress. Now that's vessels, and that equals roughly around 400 crew, 400 seafarers that have been abandoned. And that doesn't create a level playing field. And it is complicated. Some of them are very complex cases. As I said, especially within the Middle East, very, very complex cases. Some of them are not even in port, so how do you actually get to them? Some are just out in international waters because they don't come in. So we do have cases, and I see in that way that they're finding those, and I would say probably the 10%, because 90% are fairly good. Of course, you have maybe 25% that are really good, but all in all, 90%, 80% are pretty good. But the bottom 10 are really bad. And that's how do we actually get to those bottom 10?
Thank you. Brandt, I think there's some really interesting questions raised by Jackie there, and I think this issue of the sort of level playing field is something right at the heart of all of this, and a lot of ship owners will complain about the bottom feeders who undercut and pose unfair competition to them, and I think in an ILO sense and in the MLC sense, I wonder firstly how your perceptions are of how successful it has been in dealing with those problems, but also secondly, and sort of quite crucially, that sense as a global regulation, how is global enforcement sort of carried out to the same standard? Are you confident that there's a level playing field in enforcement, given that level playing field is surely at the essence of what MLC is all about?
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I'd like to start by saying something. I was listening to the debate earlier, and some people were saying those bureaucrats that created all these regulations. I must remind you, the Maritime Labor Convention was not drafted by a bunch of bureaucrats in Geneva. The Maritime Labor Convention was drafted by governments, ship owners' representatives, and seafarers' representatives. It's negotiated text. And in fact, the idea, everybody claims to be the father of this, but I mean, in many ways, because it's successful.
Or mother.
Or mother, too. Sorry, mother, yes, because we're the ILO. But I mean, even the ship owners this morning, Natalie Shaw was saying that, the ship owners had come up with the idea. In many ways, it's, to have a certificate, to have a convention that did this. So it's not just done by bureaucrats. It's your convention. And if you have any problems with it on the shipowner side, please see our shipowner friends. And when the ILO developed this convention, the idea was to come up with a comprehensive and updated convention. And that was done. And now it's been ratified by more than 80 states. We talked about, I think, 84 even this morning in another event. And it's 90% of the world's gross tonnage. And that's pretty significant. What's important behind this is to work when the convention is being, as you go forward in the convention, it's not just the ratification by a country saying, yes, I'll sign up, but there has been a vast effort to change the laws and regulations in all the states, on most of the states that have ratified the convention. This has been a big deal. So all those seafarers in those states, whether it's a flag state or a labor supplying state or even a port state, all those seafarers have benefited from major changes in laws and regulations. The ILO, we're a little bit different than the IMO, but we have this fantastic and elaborate supervisory system. So when a country ratifies a convention, it's not just they ratify it and we say, shake your hand and say thank you. They have to submit reports on how they've done this, what they're doing, and the ILO supervisory system reviews those reports, and they go back to the state and say, no, this is not quite correct. We need more information. You need to put the convention in line. So it's like a big machine driving towards getting everybody on board. Richard talked about port state control before. Port state control is part of that machine because port state control puts the pressure on those states or those ships who are in states that haven't ratified the MLC. Those states who have maritime labor certificates are to be treated more favorably than those who don't. So those states who haven't they don't carry the certificate, they should come under more pressure. And this creates a need for ship owners to want flag states to ratify, and then this puts them into the ILO supervisory system. And this is working. Now, not all states have ratified. We need major states that haven't ratified to do so. But I think largely it's been a success. And, it's not just driven by the states, it's driven by the ship owners as well, because some of you, it's kind of like a religion. Anybody who's been involved, the MLC is like a religion. You get involved and it's like spreading out. We train people, they send out, it's almost like the church, they send them out all over the world. And many of you have been baptized into this and gone through it, maybe exercised. But there's a lot of pressure, even by ship owners, to make sure, hey, we had to do this, you have to do it as well. And that's a very positive thing in an international convention. So, I mean, this whole process is leading towards a global playing field. It is not quite level yet. It is an evolving process. Some of the states, many states have not ratified. We have to get them to ratify. Some states have ratified and their laws and regulations are not yet in order, and we've got to get them in order. But if we look at from the legal protection of seafarers compared to where they were 20 years ago, it's much better.
Yeah, excellent. That's it. I was interested, Max, in Jackie's suggestion that the enforcement isn't really tough enough, and that actually, if you have a ship that is repeatedly falling foul of the regulations, you're just out of it, and you should be banned. I remember the OECD did a study some years back showing the sort of economic advantages of detention. The costs of a 30-day detention were more than outweighed by the costs of 30 days of substandard operation. So I'd suggest, what is your response to this idea that, well, maybe those who aren't abiding by the standards really should face much tougher sanctions for failure to comply?
Well, personally, I can't really think of any tougher sanctions than detaining a ship. That's pretty much the worst thing that can happen to you as a ship owner. So Jackie's suggestion of never let that ship into the country again, as far as I understand, well, there are people who improve. What do you do about those? Is that really an encouragement to do things better, or do you just say, well, then I trade somewhere else? I don't care. I think you don't feel well treated if you don't have a chance to get any better. I think we don't reach those people we want to reach, really. And what we don't want to punish, we want to improve. And sometimes we need to improve through a little bit or some punishment, so that needs to be leveled on a reasonable way, so that we actually get those in that are not in yet. That needs to be the goal. And I think by getting too harsh, and we should not forget, the MLC has a control mechanism which is absolutely unique. Which has actually been invented, and I think outside those that are involved in the MLC, that is not even very well known. So you can control ships from non-ratifying countries. That has not existed before. That had been invented more or less on the way when the MLC was created. That is unique, that is phenomenal, and that is what makes the MLC actually very sharp. And what makes the controls very sharp. And I think that can be used, well, and I think we don't need to improve the controls. I think they're pretty good.
Right. Richard, one of the points you made, which I thought was interesting, was about the change in demand on inspectors. Rather than looking at the equipment, you're going much harder on sort of softer skills. And I wondered how much of a challenge that is for inspectors, because I'd imagine it must be incredibly time-consuming and kind of sometimes difficult to really get under the sort of veneer of how a ship operates to uncover what the real problems are. And sort of allied to that, I know, again, one of the good mechanisms within MLC was this sort of grievance process. And I wondered how much you feel seafarers have been empowered by the grievance process. Is that something that is used and used to good effect?
Okay, the first thing is, of course, for port state control officers, is what's necessary is training. So there are so many different conventions they have to deal with. Just a few days ago, the Ballast Water Management Convention came into force, so we had to prepare them for that. We have a concentrated inspection campaign running now on safety of navigation, also an area where a lot of deficiencies are found. And we did the same thing with MLC, and well in advance we started. In fact, we developed a special training module. It's a 4-day course, and it's focused on the human element. So MLC is a major part of it. STCW, of course. And what we also do is, because you're a lot of times deal with people from all over the world who may have a different cultural background than the inspectors themselves, is we deal with those aspects. So we hire actors, and we do role play, and we play scenes with foreign captains and how they can sometimes react, and so that works very well. It's very much liked by the port sectoral officers, because in fact what you're doing is you hold a mirror in front of them and you say, well, this is what you do. What do you think about it? Would you do it different the next time? So that's very helpful, and you do have to accept that there are a lot of seafarers with different cultures sailing on board. Sometimes on one ship you have 5, 6, 7 different nationalities. So that doesn't only make living on board more of a challenge, but also doing the MLC inspection. And I remember in my sailing days, I was sailing on a passenger ship, and we had Indonesian crew. And one thing they would do is they would not sit on a toilet as we know it. They would take the seat off. And of course, in our standards, European standards, that would probably be a deficiency, that all the toilet seats are gone. And we say, okay, you have to put all the toilet seats back. But if you put it in the place of a different culture where it's totally normal to do that, it's a different light. So that's one of the things that we try to teach our inspectors, that you look at the situation on board and place it also in perspective, and don't write deficiencies on anything that you think is not fully in accordance with the requirements. The other point you made, I wasn't sure what you meant with that.
There's within the MLC, there's a solid sort of grievance process for seafarers to follow if they have a problem on board the ship. Yeah. And I just wondered if you have perceptions on how much that's sort of used. Is it used to good effect?
Well, you have the onboard complaint procedure, and you have the onshore complaint procedure. So we only. Of course, we ask for the records, and when the ship is subject to an inspection, but also at the Secretariat, we on a very regular basis receive complaints from seafarers, and it can have to do with different cases. Sometimes it's not payment of wages. Sometimes somebody has been on board much more than 12 months. Sometimes a seafarer wants to see a doctor, and the master denies it. It's all those different things. We try to look into it as far as we can, but what we certainly do is we give the ship a higher priority, so that it's very likely that the next port it comes to, that the ship will be inspected, and then we get feedback from the inspector, and if we have email or other particulars from the person on board, we'll try to get back to him.
Right. Is that your sense as well, Jackie? I mean, do you feel that sort of seafarers have sort of embraced MLC as the fourth pillar that it was intended, and that they're confident in sort of using it as their Bill of Rights as it was promised? And are there sort of issues that you feel that have sort of come up since it sort of started to come into effect, that particular issues of adherence and compliance that really concern ITF?
First, I just want to make a comment on Max. I'm not talking about anyone who has a deficiency. I'm talking about serious repeat offenders with situations on board the vessel, like what Richard was mentioning. There is an overcapacity, and this might actually help to reduce that overcapacity. I mean, it's serious repeat offenders. Why should they constantly be able to be in breach and then just do it again and again? So that's quickly on that. I think that the MLC, I don't think that if you went down to a port now and asked a seafarer what he thinks about the MLC, he'll probably wonder if it's some kind of short for some kind of fast food chain. I don't think they themselves really necessarily know about the MLC, but I do think that what they are more aware of is the fact that there is a process in place to be able to make complaints. That especially our affiliates and the ITF worked a lot to try to get that information out there, because you're not going to have a seafarer reading the MLC. If you know the amount of documents that they have on board to get to know and the things that they need to remember, they're not reading the MLC. A lot of them don't read the collective bargaining agreement, but at least they know that there is a process, there is a system where they can go, Port State Control, ITF inspectors. So that's a positive thing, and from there we'll take it. It will move on, and we can, from our side, assist them. So I like to look positively at that. The MLC, I think that because we haven't had a decrease in number of cases or number of back pay. I mean, we thought that maybe we'd see a big reduction in number of back pay when the MLC came in. We haven't seen that. Last year we had our inspectors collected $42 million in back pay, and that's back pay is only registered on our site, within our system, that is 3 months or more where they haven't received wages. So, but I think I want to look at the positive side and say that that is because the seafarers are more aware that they can put a claim in. And that also could be because they want to make sure that they are getting paid because of as I was saying earlier, the financial insecurity. They're worried about the fact that if they don't get paid, then will they get paid? Is something wrong with the company? We often get seafarers who will contact us and saying, oh, our wages are a bit delayed. Is something wrong with the company? Are they having financial problems? Because they probably know someone who has had on a ship where the company has been in financial trouble and where they haven't gotten paid. And then when we have the situation, the seafarers don't want to leave the vessel because they're afraid if they leave the vessel, then they will have no chance in getting that money reclaimed. So I think that the MLC absolutely is working. I think that it's strengthened the relationship between our inspectors and our affiliates with the Port State Controls. Because we have, it's a common, what we have in common is the betterment of the seafarers in their lives.
Thank you. Brandt, we all know sort of MLC is this sort of living convention, and it's, it was never sort of seen as a destination, it's a journey. We've had the first sort of sets of amendments coming through. Do you have a sense of where it will go from here? What are the kind of things that are sort of top of the shopping list in terms of, coping with anticipated demands or even evolving the convention to the next stage?
Okay, well, in terms of a living convention, yes, it's living. I mean, this convention was designed, it was constructed to allow it to be updated much easier than earlier ILO conventions. And as you said, we've gone through several sets of amendments already. And the first set of amendments, which is on abandonment and non-payment of personal injury and death claims, those have come into force. Vessels are, as of the beginning of this year, had to carry certificates for this, and this may help address, for example, the abandonment problem we talked about, because this should make it a little bit better to prevent abandonment issues, but also to shorten the duration of the issue, because the seafarer can now use a certificate and not stick around in port waiting forever for the vessel to be sold, which is the problem from before. In terms of where it goes in the future, I mean, I'm from the ILO Secretariat. We're in the hands of our constituents. I'm almost nervous if I told you what I thought should be included in the convention, because maybe somebody wouldn't be happy with that, because they'd see that we were leading the discussion. You know that one of the, besides the amendments I mentioned, there was a recognition of the bullying harassment issue, right? So now we have something where the convention's amended, it's an amendment to the guidelines, and then now that's taken on board some work that's already been done by shipowners and seafarers at the regional and also the international level. And so now that's part of the MLC. That was because there was a recognized problem there. We are dealing now with this issue of non-payment of seafarers' wages in cases of piracy, and there's all the sides have a view on this, so we have to see how it works out. I mean, if we look at, there's this general question of what happens in 10 years. I mean, obviously, I think we were talking about, somebody's talking about, I think it was you were talking about communication before, or maybe Max talking about communication issues. I mean, it's obvious that people now are used to certain types of communication. It's obvious that young people can't bear not being connected. So you could think that that's something that, if you're going to attract people to go to sea, is probably going to be a topic, whether it leads to a change to the convention or not. I mean, that's one that's clear. People were talking in the discussion before about autonomous ships. This is an interesting one from the labor side, because, I mean, I don't know what the implications will be on labor. I mean, in theory, if it's an autonomous ship and there's nobody on board, there is no labor issue. But when I went to the the Joint Ministerial Conference on Port State Control, Paris and Tokyo MOU conference that was held in Vancouver, and somebody said during that meeting that 10 years from now, this is all we're going to be talking about, including how to regulate that, including how to regulate related labor issues, because it may be autonomous or knocked down to a much smaller number of people on board, and that probably requires some reflection. So the thing about the convention is it really depends what the industry needs, and it's for the industry to tell us.
Let's ask them. I think it'll be really interesting, to very briefly before we go to the floor. But I think, what would be on your shopping list as the number one things?
I think we can answer very clearly where to take the MLC to the next stage, I think you said, or to the next level. And Brandt was very modest. The ILO is not involved. But no, we have a very clear view. And the next level is better ratification. Having more countries ratify the MLC, that makes it much stronger. And in a network effect, that is what we need to aim for. All sides can probably think of a dozen or so improvements, but somehow make it more complicated, and especially raise the bar for those that have not ratified yet. And we must think very, very, very carefully about the important countries Brandt mentioned already. They have not ratified for a reason. There are some complications in the countries. They have already found the MLC or the bar too high. If we raise it further and further, it doesn't make it easier to jump across it. So we have to not only invite them, but kindly force them jointly. And I think that is something where the tripartite is very important, where seafarers and ship owners and, if possible, also governments go jointly to those countries that have not ratified. We need to do that first before we make it more complicated for those to join. And that needs to be the next level.
Thanks very much. Would you agree, Jackie, or do you think there's more teeth needed or new elements of MLC needed?
Well, I'm not going to go into the details of the changes that we see that could be needed. It is a living convention that's supposed to adapt. I think that we need, and this is why we've commissioned Seafarers Rights International to do a survey, a report, a study on the effect of the enforcement of MLC. I think that there is a need to strengthen the port state control enforcement part of it, so that they have the capacity and the resources to be able to have proper enforcement of the MLC. But it will be interesting to see. This report should be finalized by next year to see where are we. It's a very in-depth. They're very broad, communicated with several key players within the industry, because it is important to have a very honest view on how successful is the MLC before we're able to say where would we need to strengthen, because that wasn't the intention when we wrote the MLC.
Thanks. I wondered if there's anyone at this stage who wants to... lots. Yeah, excellent. I'll go down the left just there and have some questions.
Thank you. Bruce Burrows with the Chamber of Marine Commerce, Ottawa. Max, for example, mentioned at the beginning of his comments just a few features of life at sea that have improved. And so I'm thinking in the context of promoting seafaring as a viable modern profession or as a positive career choice, and Brandt also sort of touched on this briefly. How are we doing in terms of attracting the next generation, and what could we be doing better?
I'll take.
Yeah.
I'll only say, I'll let you just to give time, Max, a second, without actually really saying anything. The ILO actually, one of the things we're going to do in the next 2 years, and in fact, with the aim of having a meeting in 2019, is we're looking at the issue of recruitment and retention of seafarers, with this emphasis also on women seafarers. So I don't have the answer, but we're working on looking at that issue because you have to think about expectations as well. Max.
Max.
Well, the answer is probably different in every single country in the world where seafarers come from. I can tell in detail from Germany, where it's very, very difficult to attract young people to the trade, to go to sea, where it doesn't appear to be particularly attractive, where we spend a lot of money attracting young people, and where it has been successful in marketing the seafaring job as a combined career perspective, spending a couple of years at sea and then having great prospects afterwards, which are real. And that's different in every single country. I believe if we go around the world for those, strange term, labor supplying countries, as if that's a product, that sometimes the job is highly attractive, and as we all know, there are the Philippines are a very important country as a labor supply country. Other countries are emerging there, and that will probably slowly move around from country to country. The job will be vastly more challenging, interesting, and the more we go into the self-sustained assets, so that the ship may be without a crew, with a smaller crew, with a part-time crew, whatever we will see in the future, none of us knows, but somebody has to take care of these ships, and that will be an ever more complicated job than it is today, and that will make it more interesting probably.
Do you think that process, which I think most people will acknowledge, is something that will sort of again bring the circle of sort of crewing back to sort of developed nations and traditional maritime nations? Do you think that's sort of something that there'll be a much greater emphasis on highly skilled, highly technical people, that will be seen as coming from, traditional maritime countries?
Well, I think we need to be very careful with some kind of post-colonial arrogance here. Some of the best seafarers are coming from what you insinuate, lesser skilled countries. No, these are highly skilled people. If the future seafarers come from Germany, the UK, from other European countries, or from Asia, we don't know, but there is no difference between these people. They're all very intelligent people, and for some coming from maybe economically different backgrounds, it may be more interesting to look for a seafaring job, but it's not like, oh, it's getting more difficult now, it's back to Europeans because they're more intelligent. Oh my God, no. No way.
I think I saw some hands up at the back. Tim?
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrew. Yeah, in case there's anyone in the room who doesn't know me, Tim Springett from the UK Chamber of Shipping. I'd be interested in the views of each panel member on what they understand by the term level playing field, because it's the big selling point for ship owners of the MLC, and it's a question I get asked a great deal, given that, who is a seafarer, what is a ship, can be decided in many instances at national level. And there are other flexibilities. There's provision for substantially equivalent measures. There are discretions for flag states. And I keep getting asked, where is the level playing field? Particularly, I get asked by flag state and port state inspectors and classification societies who come across ships of different flags with different national interpretations of the provisions.
This sounds like a good one for Richard, I think.
I saw it coming.
Yeah.
Well, there is a level playing field and there isn't. That may be a funny way of answering your question, but probably for all the ship owners in the room here, there is a level playing field. Because they have high quality companies, their ships registered in flag states which are on our white list, and they really take care of their ships. And like Max said, it doesn't matter so much where the crew comes from, as long as they're capable and have decent working living conditions. But there's, of course, also the other side of the coin, where there's no level playing field, and it's a fact of life that there are ship owners which core business or business model is to run substandard ships and try to make a profit, and they're still around. And we find them mostly in the southern part of our region. Sometimes we catch one in one of the northwestern European ports, but there are also other areas in the world, and where the MLC is not anchored as much as it is in our Western world. So there's certainly not a level playing field there, and that's why the Paris MOU is for a number of years closely cooperating, not only with the Tokyo Memorandum, but also with other MOUs, to see if from an enforcement perspective we can work on creating a level playing field in other areas of the world as well.
Brandt, I wondered if you had a view as well as an architect of the regulations.
I'm just a worker. The architects. There are many architects in the room.
Yeah.
I mean, when we look at level, right? I mean, essentially what we mean is, you imagine a line, right? Basically, that level means people not underneath the line, right? That's essentially, we don't want anybody to go below the line. If people go above the line, certainly that's fine. Unfortunately, sometimes people take an international convention and they say, oh, the convention says, like the ILO convention says you have to get, 14 hours of, you can only work 14 hours a day, or 10 hours of rest
period.
In the 24-hour period. The numbers in the convention that we have, right? And then some people say, oh, we're going to change our safe manning document based on this, right? That's not the intention. The intention is that's the limit, so you can do. So the Maritime Convention does have some flexibility. Tim mentioned substantial equivalence, but it's substantial equivalence. I mean, the idea is you're equivalent, you're not less. And even when you use those flexibility mechanisms, you have to do it in consultations with ship owners and seafarers organizations. So it's very difficult to really go below the standard of the convention. Now, when it comes to, Richard has mentioned, when it comes to compliance and enforcement, I mean, there the idea, and everybody wants this, I think, is consistent enforcement around the world. Flag state laws can be higher, but when you do port state control, it's compliance with the convention itself. So as Richard said, you want the Paris MOU to do its job, then you want the other MOUs to do their job. And that's, so in maybe some ways what's missing is, if the port state control regimes in other regions are not doing this, then you have an unlevel playing field, in the sense that there are some regions where these ships are allowed to operate. If we continue to strengthen these port state control agreements to meet the requirements of the convention and do the inspections correctly, then there's really no place for these operators to hide and to operate, and then lead to a lower standard in that region, and lead to some pocket of the world where seafarers can continue to suffer substandard conditions.
And you'd be suggesting, I take it from that there are areas in the world that it isn't at the level.
There are places in the world where port state control is perhaps not as strong as in others. I think that's probably obvious. There are places where the flag states also haven't exercised control. I mean, kind of a worst case scenario for us is a ship flying the flag of a state that hasn't ratified the MLC, operating between two ports of states that have not ratified the MLC, right? Then you have this sort of Wild West situation to some degree. So, if you can close those gaps, that's important. The thing that's great about shipping is, because it's so international, ships are constantly going in ports, and even if the flag state hasn't ratified the convention, if they come into a port state because of Richard's organization and other organizations, they're subject to the requirements of the convention, which we don't have anywhere else in the ILO, except maybe in the fishing convention, but it's nowhere near as developed in the MLC. And I think, Max, this is a fantastic thing. All the other workers' organizations in the world, when they see this, they would love to have this, but they don't have it because you don't move across borders like this.
Jackie, I think you're wanted to come in, are you?
Yes. First, I want to say that the MLC for us is the minimum. It's a minimum standard. That's like the bottom. Of course, we know that there are those that are not even up there, and I've said what I would want to do with them. But level playing field is that will differ from area to area. It could differ from national, regional to international. A level playing field, you can't say it's a level playing field if you have a vessel coming in national trade that is undercutting what would be the norm of what that would cost to be trading in specifically within that country or in a region. Completely different. So for us, a level playing field is not one size fits all, because coming from Norway, of course, if you're going to go into Norwegian trade on international levels, then that's not a level playing field, even though you abide by the MLC. There it has to be that you should be paying the same as they're paying for those that are Norwegians in that trade. So, utopia for some.
George.
Hi, George White, IMO Maritime Ambassador, CEO, Faces Shipping. There's a situation that exists in terms of the actual supply of seafarers that never seems to be getting adequately addressed. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of children, young boys and girls graduating from maritime academies all around the world who cannot get cadet berths. The situation in the Philippines is really, really strong. This is working against us because when they go through these and they can't get a job, then there's such a negative input in terms of getting through the systems. It may be as low as 6 or 8% of the children who actually start, these young people who start in the schools, by the time they graduate, actually end up with cadet berths. Economics are driving this down. Cadet berths on board the ships are more and more difficult to get. But this isn't just for the Philippines. It's happening in Europe and around the world on that. So there is a problem there. And this is coming from someone who's looking to try to bring more seafarers and increase the awareness of shipping and seafaring around the world. I've created a website, the seafarersmosaic.com, to do it, and working with the Cyprus Shipping Chamber and the Adopt-a-Ship program to increase the awareness of seafarers. The good things is that happening in the industry. But I get criticized for this, for doing it, because they said you're trying to bring more people into the industry at a time when we can't find cadet berths and all of these people coming in. So what is it that you can do on this level to try to somehow curtail the numbers that are coming through to balance off the opportunities for them? Or can you actually, as ship owners, increase the opportunities for them with more cadet berths? Is there something? Because this is going untouched and doesn't even get talked about at conferences anymore.
Nice question, and I think, Max, it's obviously one for you. I think, you know, that question of how you regulate a supply and demand thing that is so volatile is a really interesting thing, and as you say, it's something that affects seafarers in so many countries. And how do you respond to that challenge as an industry of trying to sort of regulate a sort of sustainable labour supply?
Yeah, I'm tempted to say the free market is regulating that. No. I
think those hundreds of thousands of people and families that have spent all this money.
Yeah, well, I think it's on hundreds of thousands, but
in the Philippines it would be, with all due respect.
It's certainly not hundreds of thousands who don't get a place on board. I think we need to keep the numbers right, but it is an issue. But I think in this case, it is an issue of commercially oriented schools. And as long as they market jobs that we will offer later as one asset which they actually don't have their hands on, let young people and their families pay dearly for the studies, and then afterwards there's no job. And this is not, I'm not trying to find an easy way out here, but there is not much we can do. It is another industry that needs to be addressed, and that is a commercially oriented education industry that is misusing what's being offered. We have the same thing, and that's not hundreds of thousands, it's a few dozen in Germany, where a couple of schools just try to remain in business, where they promise the young students that all they need to have is a cadet place, so they study for 3 years, and there is no cadet place because they may not be needed afterwards. So it is not something we can address. And we also, coming back to my first small attempt as an answer, we need to see, as an industry, we are not an industry that can guarantee jobs to young people that enter an education. There is no such industry in this world that guarantees jobs to anyone who study. The legal industry is not offering jobs to everybody who studied law, and that is the same for every other industry also. So we need to see, well, that's part of my answer. The other part is somebody else needs to be addressed here, that is misusing the young people and the ambition of the young people, and that's certainly not the shipping companies.
And any, Brandt?
Yeah, I'd just like to add one thing to this. You know, I don't think in any of the international conventions right now there's no requirement for cadet berths. That's interesting to think about. But there's a pressure in another convention that tends to contribute to this problem, and that's in the 69 tonnage convention. When that convention was adopted, it included accommodation spaces and gross tonnage. And our understanding, I may be wrong, but our understanding is that this tends, because the accommodation spaces are included in gross tonnage, and ships are built basically to sort of maximize their profitability, there's a tendency sometimes to really reduce the accommodation space, because you get taxed on that and charged on that every time you come in and out of port. So we fought a little bit to try to say, no, let's exclude that accommodation space, because not just for cadets, but I mean for having lots of space for seafarers and other reasons on board. And I think that battle has been lost, but maybe it's still going on. I don't know, maybe there's some naval architects in the room who know. But I mean, sometimes you have these things that are not necessarily an ILO convention, but elsewhere, that lead to a pressure that reduces the space on board a vessel. Yeah. And then there's no place to put the cadets. We understand that's part of the problem, but this is maybe beyond this. So you could look at it as an ILO thing. You could also look at it as an IMO issue as well. How this gets resolved, I don't know, but
it is an interesting question, and I wonder how much ILO could lean on IMO to say, hang on, this is having a very negative effect on the industry here.
We pointed it out in times before. We've pointed it out with respect to even fishing vessels, because you have fisheries management regulation, which limits the size of the vessel. It tends to squish everybody into a space. And then, and then you make it unattractive to go to sea because there's not as much space. You really need to do that? Can you construct the vessel differently so that you can have more space for people on board so they have a better life? But sometimes these things are not always ILO matters. Sometimes they're IMO matters, and we raise them. But I mean, I think we just have to think of these things always this people side in everything we do. But I understand for the naval architects there are some other reasons why it's really hard not to include accommodation spaces in the gross tonnage figure. So,
Natalie.
I want to go back. Natalie Shaw, I'm the Director of Employment Affairs at ICS. I want to go back to your opening question, I think, or your opening point, which was something along the lines of, has the situation deteriorated, or are people more aware? I think, as Jackie alluded, I think it's quite true. If you ask a seafarer about the MLC, they won't know about it. They won't need to know, because what they need to know is about the national laws and regulations governing their particular service on their particular vessel. So, but I do think there is greater awareness of this, and I still think there's some work to go. I heard some comments about areas around the world where there are gaps. One of the major challenges is, without any doubt, is the Middle East. I think we have a major challenge there to tackle and to get greater buy-in. The ILO, nobody's mentioned this today, but the ILO and IMO have a joint database on abandonment cases. And unfortunately, the cases that tend to be cited tend to be cases within the Middle East. They also tend to be cases which are ships which have been registered in the Middle East, which are outside the scope of the MLC. I think Brandt mentioned 84 ratifications of the MLC. If you compare that, I think, with SOLAS, which has 150, we still clearly have a number of ratifications to go, and many of those will come from Middle Eastern countries. So that in itself is a challenge. But my question is actually to some of the government people in the room who are sitting around, and possibly Richard and Brandt. Some of the challenges which I see now are where provisions within the MLC perhaps contradict or perhaps are worked against with conditions or requirements in other conventions. So, for example, an abandonment was notified on the ILO website yesterday of a vessel from a particular country, and the reason we can't get the seafarers repatriated despite the hard work of the P&I club involved, which is a member of the IG, is because if the seafarers go, it would be contradicting the safe manning required perceived by the state. So we have a situation where seafarers are desperate to get home. They've been abandoned for months, their wages have not been paid, and yet other obstacles are being put in their way to stop them from being able to get that fundamental right. And I just wonder, where do we balance this? Do we balance the needs of safe manning before the fundamental human rights of the seafarers on board the vessel? I use this as an example because there are a number of other cases that I'm sure Jackie is familiar with that land on my desk. We think they will be easy to resolve, but they're actually made extremely difficult because somebody will say the nuances of the laws are perhaps not as exact as the spirit of the intention of the law in which it was originally and how it was originally designed to act.
Wow, that's quite a challenging question, that one. I wonder who'd like to take that one on.
I can just say a few words about the Middle East, because we have seen an increase in that area, and that is a complication, and we work very closely with Natalie on those abandonment issues. That's one of the reasons why we have done ITF contacts in the various unions in those countries. And we've been actually asked by our Bahrainian union to do an MLC seminar. And they've invited the UAE to attend as well, the government. So we're trying very slowly to try to build up this knowledge. Our affiliates have the knowledge, and that's passing that on to the government, which is always very, very delicate. We're also building communication and trust with our Iranian affiliates. So these are not, it's long-term commitment from our side to try to not tell them what to do, because if we do that, then they'll just go away, but to at least try to get them involved and engaged, and that they can see the benefit for them as seafaring nations as well.
Any other panel members have a view?
I just want to say, so on the abandonment, Natalie mentioned the abandonment database. This is run in our unit, and this database was set up by the IMO and the ILO, and it involves ILO, IMO, ICS, and ITF. And I'd like to say that, we talk about ship owners as always, but Natalie does a great job, along with Katie Higginbottom of the ITF and Jen DeBoer at IMO. They do a really great job, and my colleague Jin Hawk No, in trying to resolve these cases, and it's often quite difficult. And actually the difficulty is often when the flag state doesn't respond. Sometimes other states as well, but that's difficult. But we've really worked hard to make this database as accurate as possible. But on this issue, as I understand it, Natalie was saying that if you have a case where the person has been abandoned and then they are repatriated, but they're kept from going home by the flag state or by the port state? Because I mean, if the safe manning document is not met because the person is going home and it's rightful for them to go home, then the ship doesn't sail, I guess.
It depends if the ship's in port.
Yeah, if the ship's in port, yes, I mean, of course.
Got a question down here at the front. Oh, and one Arthur up at the back there.
Good afternoon. My name is John Adams, TK Shipping. I think that's the hat I'll wear for this question. But I've been wearing different hats today, just for you guys who didn't wear it here earlier. But I don't wish to move away from what is obviously a very serious part of this discussion. But if I was to just go on what I've been hearing so far, if the basic premise for this discussion is decent work for seafarers, are we delivering? That would seem not to be the case. I'm hearing a lot of negatives, and I think that is a serious thing to look at. But it does seem a world away from the world I think that we live in some parts of the industry, where people are our greatest assets, people are who we're going to invest in, people who we're going to keep safe and look after their welfare and their well-being. We will provide a service to them. We'll look at career progression. it would seem light years away from the dialogue we're having, but I can't be in the minority. I mean, there must be many, many other organizations who live in the world that I'm in. I'm not saying that we disregard what we're talking about today. I mean, just 2 days ago, I was at a book launch for Human Element, Safety and Safety Critical Organizations. This is where we're trying to drive an agenda, keep people safe, bring about the right sort of constructive, positive thinking. I suppose the question I'm trying to lead to is, does the panel, and it's not to turn away from the serious aspect of this, but what percentage of global seafarers are experiencing this abandonment or poor treatment or non-payment? Is it getting to a lower minority, or am I deluding myself that it's actually increasing in some way? Just so I can get a kind of global perspective, or put all this in some sort of perspective, if that helps. Thank you.
Jackie?
Well, I can just start because I don't think we have the proper data to be able to compare. So you have before the MLC, and then you have after the MLC. So it's difficult to compare that data. The database about abandonment, that's this year. So we don't know until we see maybe next year, has that become better because of the changes that have been done in regards to the MLC on abandonment. So we don't have the proper information. That's why we've asked the Seafarers' Rights International to do that study for us, which is they're taking 2 years to do the study, so that we have at least more information. And they're going very broad in regards to contacting within the industry, not just going to the governments and then going to the employers, employees, but they're going even broader than that, because we basically don't know. As I said, we don't see any reduction in backpay claims. Now, is that because there's no improvement? Or is it because there's more actually coming to the forefront who wouldn't have never known where to go before? So I do think, as I said, I think the positive is that companies are much more aware, companies, employers, on wanting to have healthy, both on the health and well-being of the seafarers, at least the ones that we deal with. Now, those rotten, dirty bastards that don't deal with us, we don't know what they're doing.
I'll try not to use that colourful language, but I think we're in the same, at least officially, well, I've got the microphone here, but maybe offline, Jacqueline. But the thing is that I'm trying to also make the point that we're all on the same side, because it's in our best interest to improve the reputation of our industry. Mm-hmm. And that we're trying to attract people into the industry. What I used to hear some years ago, why is it a less attractive career? Because of criminalization, because of lack of opportunity to get ashore, and all that type of thing. Are we moving on from that is really what I would like to know. I take your point about the information being relative year on year, but I would like to know just something like, of the global manpower that's out there, 1%, 0.5%, 5% are suffering these things, and are we moving the needle on that? So therefore I could say, as I would, 99% are getting treated better than that, and therefore we still have to eradicate the poor performers and those who are taking an opportunistic approach to the industry.
Yeah, I wonder whether Richard, as the sort of gatekeeper for the inspectorate, might be able to sort of deliver a bit of data back up on that.
Well, Andrew, let's say the data that we have is what we actually see. I mean, the ships we inspect, and of course, this morning the carrot and the stick was mentioned, and for us that's also an important principle. Good ship owners get rewarded and they get inspected less, and ship owners who of ships that get detained frequently, they either get banned and or they get inspected once every 6 months. So let's say we do have some figures, but it's not the full picture. And in particularly in the Paris MOU area, ship owners are aware that they will get a strict inspection and the sanctions can be severe. So a lot of them probably don't venture into our ports. But if you go to the Black Sea already, it is a totally different world there already, and it's still very close. When you go beyond there, let's say sometimes I have the privilege of visiting other regions, And it is just incredible what you see there. The ships laying at the anchorage, waiting for cargo. There's a big competition going on there as well. And not just for cargo, but also with regard to the welfare of the seafarers on board there. And it's another world. It's not what we're used to.
I'm getting the sense that there's no easy answer to your question, John, so tough one. I'm also highly conscious that we're coming up to drinks time and not wanting to get into the way of any of that, but I know there's somebody with their hand up for a long time up there, Arthur, and can we have your question, please?
Just very quickly, Andrew. Arthur Bowering, Hong Kong. Just to perhaps put a few things right about the convention, the Maritime Labour Convention. This is not an IMO convention, it's an ILO convention. And there is a major difference between the two. You do not comply with the Maritime Labour Convention. You comply with the laws and regulations of the state that brings the convention into effect. So that means that you can have differing interpretations or applications of the convention provisions. Now, this is the bedding in period for the convention. I was talking to Brandt about this earlier. There is a bedding in period. And if you look at the Committee of Experts reports that have analyzed the Article 22 reports, these are the annual reports required by the ILO Constitution on the application of the convention. If you look at those, the Committee of Experts have gone back to the governments saying, how do you apply Regulation 3.1? Why are you applying flexibility here when the convention doesn't allow flexibility? Have you discussed this flexibility in this particular area with the seafarer and shipowner representatives as required by the convention? So the convention itself, I think it's very important. Port State are inspecting the ship against the flag state's application of the convention, not against the convention itself. If Port State feels that the flag state is not applying the convention correctly, there is an article in the ILO Constitution where the Port State can go back to the ILO and make a representation. I think it's a representation, Brandt, please correct me, it might be a complaint, against the flag state interpretation, which is then taken into the Committee of Experts as to how the flag state is applying that particular provision. So it's a very different process in the ILO to the IMO. And I think we've got to be careful when we're talking about compliance with the convention. It's not compliance with the convention, it's compliance with the laws and regulations that bring the convention into effect. Thank you.
Any thoughts?
Only to say that in the ILO, if it's made by ship owners and an employer work organization, in this case a ship owner and seafarer organization, it's called a representation. But if a state does the same sort of thing, it's called a complaint. That's the terminology on it.
Right. Just one last question, and then I think...
We have 64,000 vessels globally, I think was the number, roughly the number we talk about in the BIMCO ICS study. If we look at the numbers of reported cases of abandonment in a year, and I use that very carefully because we're talking about the cases which have been formally reported. There may well be others which have not been reported. We're talking, I think, Jackie, you said 248?
36 cases that have been reported and 10 that are in the process. So 46 cases, 46 vessels this year.
So realistically, if we were to factor in cases perhaps that haven't been reported, we'd be up to about 200 maximum. 200 out of 64,000 doesn't even get us to 1%. So we're talking about a small number of cases, but for the seafarers who are affected and who are on board those vessels and their families, that is a significant issue. So I don't think we can always just talk about percentages here. We have to remember we're talking about people, and I leave us on that point.
Thanks.
I think it's important that most of the industry is doing it right. I think that's...
Just one comment. Just what you said on that, we have a regular problem in the ILO when we discuss conditions of work of people, and that is that people don't call us up usually and say, hi, my life's great. They usually call us up because they have problems, so there's a tendency to think of those problems. But we try to be careful when we have our international meetings and things to have a balanced view. because otherwise, as you said, you can create an unnecessarily negative image that can have an effect on recruiting people. So we're very aware of that. But, you know, we have to be reminded sometimes, because we're like social workers in a way that, you know, the things that come to you, the things you're trying to deal with, are often the bad situations. But we also do try to stress the positive nature of the seafaring life for the majority of people.
Well, there's definitely no one who calls us and says that their life is great. That's not what they call the trade unions. But there is positive aspects of it. And yesterday we did a function with IMEC in regards to the IBF to show that there is a sustainable partnership development, that we have that. And that's why we did that together. So yes, there is.
I don't minimize all these comments. I appreciate that, but I'm just saying, we employ 7,000 seafarers. They don't all call me up and say it's great, but nobody calls me up to say it's crap. So, I mean, we're getting something right, and I think there's more like-minded people like me as well, and it's only perspective. I agree with Natalie. We can't just live on percentages, but there's a perspective in telling the overall story. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I think it's been a really good discussion, and yeah, clearly we could have gone on and on and on. And as I said at the beginning, I think, you know, seafarers are right at the core of all of this. I think one of the final things I just asked for as a two-word answer from every panelist, and picking up on your points about negativity. One is, would you recommend a career at sea to one of your children? Two, if you could pick one thing that you think would most improve seafarers' lives, what would it be? Maybe start with Max, work down.
Recommend.
Well, my daughter told me no. So much to that one. And, well, the one improvement, that's a difficult one. Probably bring as much administration to shore as possible and get it away from board.
Thanks. Richard?
Yeah, so let's say a personal perspective, of course. I would say yes. Life at sea is different, certainly different from the time I went to sea, much different. But it's also more challenging. The technology that's on board nowadays is fascinating. Sometimes when I come on a modern ship, I think, boy, I wish I could have sailed on this. So yeah, I would recommend it, but it's you have to bear in mind that it's a different world now.
And what would be your one sort of major improvement that you think would most benefit seafarers?
Accommodation. I think that would be an area, because we're still living with the standards of which are quite old already. So I'm sure a lot of ship owners have made improvements on that and are above the standard, but the minimum standards with regard to accommodation are not of this time.
Excellent. Jackie?
My daughter did ask me, and I did say yes, but it turned out that she gets seasick, so she decided herself that wasn't a career path. But in regards to one thing to change, I agree with Richard, it would be accommodation. I was just recently on board a training vessel, and when I was at sea, we didn't have our own toilet. Now that was fine. I was 20 and we could share a toilet. We were 40 women sharing 4 toilets and 4 showers. Those 2 days I was on that training vessel and was only sharing with 10 women, I was thinking, oh my God, it's going to be so nice to go home to my own bathroom. So accommodation, definitely.
Okay, I'm an ex-seafarer a long time ago. You said life at sea. Life at sea sounds like a sentence, in a way, that you're going to spend your whole life at sea. And so I think that requires some thought, because it's a picture. There are really fantastic things about going to sea, but then if you're in a storm, suddenly you say, why am I doing this? A career in shipping, I think, is the better approach, maybe. It's just not life at sea, it's a career in shipping. So you have time at sea, and then you bring the value of that ashore. I think maybe that's the way to look at it. And I think that's what people have said. In terms of improvements of life, I mean, I don't know. The one that I think of is isolation. Because accommodation is, accommodation is important, but isolation, it's really hard to be isolated. Going to sea already, you're isolated. You're isolated from your family. You know, people that sit there and say, I'm at sea, and I've been at sea, and I haven't seen my family for 8 months, or 6 months, right? So if you can reduce isolation in one way or another, it's better. And it can meet even isolation by having so few people on board, there's nobody to talk to. But that's a basic human need.
Yeah. And there, I think there's a whole other conversation that we didn't have about crew communications and the impact of social media on board. So maybe for next year. But thanks so much. It's been a good participation, great panel, and really appreciated sort of discussion on what we always say, humans the most important part of the industry, and some really interesting feedback and some good debate. So thank you very much.
Andrew, thanks very much to you for steering this debate so skillfully. Thank you. I think we've listened to 4 excellent panels today of equal weight, relevance, and importance. Thank you for being such an engaged audience. A lively audience really makes for a good conference, so please take yourselves a pat on the back. This year, you've seen a new ICS brand, and you've seen a new approach to our conference. And the reason that we did this new approach was we listened to the feedback we've had over the last few years to the format of the conference. My personal view is I think this format works remarkably well. I think we've had some brilliant speakers and some fantastic moderators who've really dragged out a good conversation. I'd like to thank the Bahamas Maritime Administration, the Bahamas Shipowners Association, and Videotel once again for the very generous sponsorship, without which not only would it be difficult for us to do this, but I would have a much harder time with the ICS board. Thank you very much indeed.